Good morning. It is finally cooling off in southeast Texas. We have had a lot of days at or over 100 degrees, which is not uncommon, especially as it approaches August. August is like the month of 100s. There are months where every day is over 100 degrees. I have yet to remember a birthday year that I've had, because my birthday's on the 5th of August, where it hasn't been well over 100 degrees here. So, but I'm surprised that it's actually really cool the last couple of days, and breezy, which we don't have any rain forecasted in the near or distant future, and I have not been watering, so the fact that it's so cool this time of year is actually really surprising, because for a while it was just unbearably hot, and usually it continues to get unbearably hot until late September, I would say. But that's okay. I'm glad to have some relief from the heat wave, because I am not a fan of the heat at all. I do not like summertime. I do not like heat. I really like the fall and spring weather, especially fall, because it's the most stable season that we have. But it doesn't seem to matter, because we've been spending a lot of time, about 2.5 hours north of here, because my husband works in that area and I recently got a job there. And so we've been working out of town and will continue to do so. So I'm not sure exactly what the future holds for this house. We've talked about selling and moving out there. It's more of a rural area outside of a bigger city, and so we'd have a lot less restrictions as far as raising animals and growing a garden. However, it's hard to leave something you've known your whole life, right? So we'll kind of see what happens and play it by ear. But for now, I just kind of wanted to come out here and show off my garden, because I've slacked off in it so much this year. When I first started making videos, I was at the time not working. I had stopped working because my daughter had some health issues. And then my son started having health issues, and then myself. So it was just a mess of issues. And then I was going to college just part-time, and so I started going to college full-time again. I started working full-time hours, and it has been a lot and really hard to keep up with the garden. So the first thing that I was kind of standing in front of right here is our apple tree. And I planted this, I don't even remember what type of apple tree it is at this point, and I planted it last year. It was substantially taller. It was like 8 feet. I cut it down to right here, and you can see where it's been cut. And all of this is this year's growth, so it's kind of growing back, but this gave us a little bit more control. It was really flimsy, had a really thin trunk, and now it's actually thickened up quite a bit and gotten a bit sturdier since we cut it back. So I definitely see the benefits of cutting back trees. I didn't always like the idea of that, but it really does seem to make a difference. And then I kind of wanted to show off what's going on over here. And the garden's all but been abandoned. It's basically taking care of itself. You can tell by the amount of grass in the walkways. We've been having one of the neighbors' kids come down, paying him to cut the grass and weed eat for us. And that's been really helpful. But it doesn't help that we don't really take care of the garden. However, we are still getting somewhat of a harvest in this sad little garden that's left over. If you know us, you know winter is the best time for us for growing, and fall we grow a lot of green vegetables then and freeze them, so we don't really have to worry about growing a lot in the summer months, because during winter and late spring we grow a lot and fill up our deep freezer with vegetables, and that pretty much sustains us for the entire year. Now all of this is where the cucumbers used to be, so if you've been following us for a little while, you've seen that we grew the salt and pepper cucumbers, which overall I really like the flavor of. They were one of the best cucumbers, but they do get bitter during the summer, and they are prone to turning yellow during a heat wave. Usually they're white with little black spines, and that's why they're called salt and pepper cucumbers. You can see what's left of them. They're very sad. Here's a little flower down there. So there are a couple of flowers, but I haven't seen any fruit in a couple of weeks just because probably it's so darn hot, and these really do just need to be pulled out, but I'm not really messing with them. Look at this poor fake plant. It kind of died back during the winter, and it's coming back, but it's surrounded by grass because, like I said, I've just kind of abandoned our garden. Now, these are all the okra. These are the heavy hitters, and they're still not full grown. Keep in mind that I have not been watering anything, but the thickness of these plants is incredible. There's Dad. So it's mid-video, and my dad showed up to pick up my son, and look, there's actually a feather right here on the ground. So I'm a little sidetracked, but here is the stalk of this okra. It's gotten pretty thick at the bottom, so I'm actually really impressed by that. Okra is a great plant because it thrives so well in the heat and does okay in the humidity too, but if I don't water them all the time, it's okay. And while they still don't grow as well as they should or as quickly as they would if I watered them consistently, they still grow fairly well, which really helps when it comes to water restrictions, which do come this time of year. Now, one thing that I noticed was that at some point we forgot one of the okras, and this okra is now bigger than my hand. So usually I would pick this, but I think I'm just gonna let it sit, maybe save for seed. I'm not sure. And you can see this one's still really tiny. So what I'm actually standing on is a mound that I mounded up around here. It's just that the grass has grown over it. And this is the same mound that I grew all my squash in earlier this year. And then I just transplanted the okra in between it. So when the squash bugs finally killed all my squash, and the squash bugs were atrocious this year because they were literally, like, I would go outside in the middle of the night because the ducks would be upset and see squash bugs just covering their pen and spraying the ducks. It was insane. But look at this. Isn't this beautiful? So okra are related to hibiscus, and the flowers really show that. I never realized how absolutely exquisite okra was until I started growing it myself. And all of the different color varieties of okra will have different color flowers, but this is one of my favorites. The yellow flower, it's just absolutely beautiful. You could definitely use these in cut flowers. Now, these are all were derived from Clemson spineless okra. They are the heavy hitter okra, but what I've noticed is they actually have quite a bit of spines still on them. And look, you can see here's another okra that I have forgotten, and it's huge. This is pretty much a seed pod. I could let it dry on the plant, but I think I'll just let it dry separately. And actually on this one, I better go ahead and pull it off too. When I'm working out of town the next couple of weeks, I will not be coming back home, so there will be a ton of very overgrown okra unless somebody comes over here and picks it, which there are a few people, including our neighbors, that have permission to do so, but also they're also managing their busy schedules. So I didn't get to show off these flowers nearly enough this year, and they are just absolutely breathtaking. I could just drive past a field of okra or use these as plants in the garden. I am so in love with them. And then my dad came over and he saw this little okra and he's like, that one's ready, because he likes them when they're a little smaller, and he is right. They taste best when they're smaller. The texture is better. Now on this variety, I have noticed that the okra stays softer longer, and I love eating these raw. I haven't previously, but I definitely do. The size of these is incredible. These are great plants. I can't wait to see them reach full height, and I'll actually probably water them at some point because they need it. You can see how sad even the blackberries look. They are very overgrown. I have not done my due diligence about taking care of any of this over the summer because I've been extremely busy with everything going on, and I hate the heat, like I've said a billion times before. So, and you can see just the amount of grass here. I wood chipped all this walkway, and the grass has regrown since I did not pull it out like I should have, or let the animals in here to take over. I'll probably fence this in and let the ducks in here, and they'll kill the grass in no time. But if you're thinking about wood chipping everything, you need to understand that the reason that so many people with these beautiful wood chip paths have them clean is they do something to control the weeds and grass that will still grow on top of it and seed over it. They either have animals, whether chickens or ducks, walking around, and their manure and feet scratch it up or flatten it out. In the case of ducks, the manure burns it or the animals eat it. And so that's how, when you have animals, it helps maintain it. But when you're doing yourself, it can be overwhelming. And this summer, because we've spent so much time not at home, we actually cut down all of our animals down to only 5 ducks. And if you've followed our channel for any amount of time, you know that that's really unusual for us. We have geese, we have a ton of ducks, we used their eggs, we acquired chickens earlier this summer, and we really love those, but we spent so much time at the rent house near our jobs that we couldn't really be in both places, and we were spending a lot of time letting other people gather the eggs, so it wasn't working for us if we weren't going to be home, especially with me also working out of town. Previously it was just my husband, and he would drive home every night, even though he was driving round trip about 5 hours a day. And so when I ended up taking a job out there, we were able to go to work together, but still nobody was home, because even though half of our kids are old enough to kind of stay alone, the other half are way too young. So it just is what it is, and we're going to have to reclaim a lot of this, but we'll wait and see what happens. And you can see down here, these strawberries are still in there, but they definitely look like they've been choked out. This strawberry plant looks like it died, but believe it or not, come winter or next spring, they'll pop back up again. They do not do well during the heat. They often die back, and it looks like they're completely dead. If you don't know anything about strawberries and you're new to gardening, you may be tempted to just rip them out. If you live in a hot area, don't do that, because I promise you, 9 times out of 10, when the weather cools down again, they will come back. Now, you can see this okra is the only one that survived in this garden bed, but also a lot of the blackberries have fallen, whether it due to a bad storm that we had several weeks ago, which is basically the only time it's rained, and it was very extreme. We lost power and everything, or just to overall overgrowth and breaking too, because I haven't maintained them. It's funny because right here, this is broken, which will lead to a bacterial infection, so I need to cut that. But it's continued to grow, and it's actually growing right up this way and all the way over there. So it's really crazy what plants will do on their own. And look, this is where I grew the lettuce earlier this year, and it is completely overgrown. There are even vine weed, which are basically wild. I can't even think of the word. Oh well. Well, anyways, we have vine weed. So once these get in your yard, they're impossible to get rid of, it feels like. And so that is a huge issue. I remember when I was a little kid, I used to plant the domesticated version of all of these plants in our garden, and I can't for the life of me think of what the plant is called. I want to keep saying balloon flower because balloon flower is part of that family, but it's not just the balloon flower. It'll come to me, or one of y'all will comment it, and I'll feel silly, but that's okay. But they just take over a lot of plants that we think of as pretty and are domesticated now that also grow wild. They are just like atrocious weeds. And once you start vegetable gardening, you start to realize that there are certain flowers that do well with your plants and certain flowers you want nothing to do with. Oh, morning glory. That's what they are. Morning glories. And vineweed is essentially wild morning glory. And while I absolutely adore morning glories, once they get into your garden, they are terrible to get out, and they take over everything, especially in hot, humid weather, which they adore. So now I've kind of walked around this side of the garden. There's quite a bit going on the other side too. I have the flowers have basically all died out in the front. The blueberries are looking sad because it's past their season and it's way too hot for them. That's the one thing about renting a little further north I'm excited about, is maybe we'll have a chance to grow some blueberries there and decide 100% if we really fully want to commit to moving all together or what we choose to do. We do have some work to do on the inside of the house, and that's going to affect being able to sell and when and our time frame for everything. With everything going on, we're considering public school for the kids just because managing everyone's health is getting a little difficult. And I also have to take care of my own health, and that doesn't mean that it has to be permanent. If you're a homeschooling parent and you're having some kind of health issues or crises at home, understand that there's nothing wrong with putting your kids in public school, even for a season or two, until you get things sorted out, or choosing one or the other. I am not anti-public school, and I am not anti-homeschool. I am pro-education, so it's just whatever is best for your family, you and your child. So those are some big changes for us, though, going from staying at home and going to school from home to working full-time and going to school full-time and everything else, and possibly considering public school for the kids. It is a lot of changes in a very short season. The summer has been a whirlwind, which is why the garden kind of looks like this. So don't ever think that you have to 100% manage everything, because it's just not possible sometimes. Now, it'll be up to the ducks to help me get all of this back in order, because they will kill up all of this grass in no time, and the garden will start getting beautiful again. As for the front garden, where all the flowers and watermelons are, everything looks so sad. The grapevines are still producing grapes, which is pretty cool, but most of the flowers have died back, except for the herbs such as chocolate mint and bee balm, which is also from the mint family. Wild bergamot is another name for it, and those will continue to take over everything. But to avoid having an incredibly long video where I just keep going on and on, I will record those later. Plus, the heat of the day is coming, and we know that means that my phone camera will soon start overheating, because it gets hot here so quickly. So thank you guys for hanging out with me and seeing that realistically gardens can't always be managed effectively, but they can still continue to produce a harvest. And if that's the season you're in, I just want you to know that is okay.